we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast, hit us up on our DMs on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and Instagram at the Bigmark Pod or at the Bigmark Podcast, respectively. There, like I said, hit us up anytime if you want to hear about an episode, want to give me a critique. You know, you got a new idea, you want to come on the episode, on the podcast. We always love to have people on, especially in the new studio. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but we'd love to have someone come on in here. The new setup is perfect for a guest, and it's just going to be tons of fun. So please reach out, hit us up. If you did want to support the podcast, also check out our Patreon, patreon.com/BigmarkPod. There's a few different ways you can donate to the podcast there. Thank you so much for spending your time here. But, the one thing you can always do to support without having to throw any shekels at me is just like and subscribe and follow on YouTube, or, tell your friends, write a review if you want, put 5-star review would be wonderful. But again, tell your friends, share the podcast. If you think that they'll like it, let them know, because the way we can grow the podcast is by letting everyone know it's out there and growing the Bigmark community. Cause we're always talking about different stuff here, and I think everyone's going to have different kind of appreciations and understandings and feelings. And again, all these different aspects of life that come into play and different facets. And I think each one of our perspectives can always lend, a new perspective on life and ways that we can continue to move towards working together, working with love, working with understanding. Anyway, without going too tangential, and maybe it's just in the new space, I'm feeling the new digs, but I want to welcome everyone to the new studio. This is my new apartment here, and this is part of the apartment, and it's going to be interesting for anyone who wants to come over. You're going to be basically in the studio when you're chilling in my living room. So welcome to my living room. This is where we're going to hang out. We're going to talk about weird shit. We're going to talk about everything from sports to psychedelics. So again, thank you for being here. It's really, I've been wanting to do this podcast for a while. In fact, I had to kind of look back in my own podcast because, it's the 185th podcast, I think. Man, I've lost count by now. So some of them I can't even remember if I've even done them before. And if I have, hey, I'm doing it again. But I checked back and saw that I hadn't done an episode on this subject, which is we're going to be talking about ReBoot today. So if anyone's ever seen the show, it's a Canadian animated TV series. It was on throughout the 90s into 2001. 1994 to 2001 to be precise. And a huge part of my childhood, I was talking to some of my friends at work, and they remembered it fondly as well. So that was some of the inspiration why I wanted to talk about it tonight. It was created by Gavin Blair and Ian Peterson, who actually did some of the CGI work for the Dire Straits' Money for Nothing video, which is really interesting, which was some really, really early CGI work. Phil Mitchell and John Grace, who all worked out of Vancouver's Mainframe Entertainment. The visuals were done by Brendan McCarthy, who's an artist and designer who also co-wrote Mad Max Fury Road, which I thought was a super kind of fucking califragilisticexpialidocious, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, it was produced, also produced by Mainframe Entertainment and Alliance Distribution, which, was a really big Canadian distribution company. And, so they had some money behind it. Originally aired on YTV. If anyone remembers YTV, could probably do a whole episode, on YTV for that matter. Youth television is kind of what it stood for. But again, it's kind of one of those one of those things where as a kid, I just, I grew up, I was raised on TV, as Gord Downey would say. But, TV was such a big part of my childhood and many people in my generation's childhood. And why TV was kind of always on, and it always seemed to be pretty much geared to like my exact age group, either a year or 1 year older, 1 year behind me. But basically it seemed to be completely geared to my generation. And then who knows, maybe I outgrew it myself, or it just started to shift its demographic. Like I said, it originally aired from 1994 to 2001. There's only 4 seasons though, but it officially called it quits in November 2001. So that was kind of a wild time. Like shit, September 11th happened, and then ReBoot fucking is canceled. So rough year 2001. Damn, I was 10 years old. And it's funny, like looking back and like doing some of the research here, watching some clips and stuff. Like I remember, I still remember a lot of the stuff. I remember a lot of the plots. I remember all the characters. And it's really interesting because like I was pretty young watching this. I mean, it aired when I was 3, so I don't think I was really watching it and like understanding what was going on. But until I was 10, I remember all this stuff, and I guess I was just young enough and just impressionable enough, and watched enough TV at that point that I could kind of understand and remember all this stuff. So really cool. But again, kind of watching it is pretty fucking dated. It is one of the first made for TV series that use computer generated images. So like it was pioneering. And one of the main reasons why it came out in 94 was because they had to wait for the technology. They actually conceived the show in 1987. Soon after they did the Money for Nothing video, but Gavin Blair and Ian Peterson and Phil Mitchell and John Grace, all the guys, they came up with this idea, but the technology just was not there yet. So they really, really couldn't, they really, really couldn't make it happen. So, it's funny as the show progressed too, because obviously, moving into 2001, the graphics were getting better, and that was kind of really represented in the show. And not only in the show's actual graphics and, like image and the way the show looked, but just like also the subject matter of the show, which we'll get into in a little bit. But we'll kind of look at some of the main characters of the show. Of course, we have Bob, our main character, guardian of Mainframe. And Mainframe is so more or less, the mainframe is like the like CPU, like the basically like imagine if you could like go inside your computer, and this is like a 1990s computer, go inside your computer and that's actually like a city in there, and there's like people and sprites and like all these different characters and stuff are the ones that are actually making it. It's like, it's almost kind of like Osmosis Jones, but instead of in the human body, it's in the computer. So people, beings, things live in there, and that's what's actually like powering your computer. And then like if you're like going to play a game and stuff, you're basically like, playing against these people. Like these are the computer. This is the computer. Like, when you play against the computer in your video games, these are the people you're playing against essentially. So it flips the script, right? Like it kind of puts you on the side of the computer, where you're basically rooting against the user, who you don't know obviously, but that would be you in that situation. Throughout the years, Michael Berenger and Ian James Corlett were the voices of Bob. Dot Matrix, who is like kind of like Bob's girlfriend, but also just like another protagonist in the story. She's really good. She's very heroic and a good mentor, really, or like a good role model, I should say, not mentor, good role model. Kathleen Barr, she's the voice of Dot Matrix. Enzo Matrix plays Dot's little brother, who again over the years, even in the first season, it was voiced by Jesse Moss and Matthew Sinclair. And then Enzo from seasons 2 to 3 was by Christopher Gray, and then Danny McKinnon And then later on in the show, if everyone has seen the show and you remember, eventually Enzo grows up. I think there was like kind of like a rapid aging process that happened that I can't really remember. But anyway, Enzo ends up being like adult Enzo, and he goes by Matrix instead of just Enzo Matrix. He goes by just Matrix, and Paul Dobson is his voice. Andrala is his like little girlfriend, and Shirley Milner and Andrea Libman voiced her, you know, both when she was young and when she was old respectively there. The villains being Megabyte, Tony J provided the voice for Megabyte, and Hexadecimal was also voiced by Shirley Milner. So she did Andrala and Hexadecimal, who was like such a wicked villain. Like she was really scary and really arch. And her and Megabyte were great. Like you couldn't really know, like it was hard to tell if they were like somehow oddly romantically involved, but they were like definitely involved. And at one point they like merge and become some ultra villain called Gigabyte. And then we had Fong, who was Michael Donovan. He also voiced Mike TV and a bunch of other kind of like lower characters, as a lot of voice actors do. And like I mentioned, you know, this is basically like, it's basically like you are in the computer and you're living in the computer. And when a user loads a game cube drops down on a random location in the mainframe, basically sealing it off from the rest of the system and turning it into a gamescape. And it's kind of funny. It's called a game cube and it is purple. I really wonder how much, like, Nintendo must have completely fucking stole that. Like, not stole that, but we're like completely inspired by that, because it's literally called a GameCube and it fucking follows them. It's really fucking cool. Bob frequently enters the games. You know, he usually kind of like sees them coming down, and I think the only way you can get in them is if you're already in the sector when the game kind of comes down. And again, like I said, like I just said, the game kind of turns that sector into a gamescape. So whatever the game might be, that area instantly becomes the new game, right? So like if it's like a racing game, that whole area now becomes like a racetrack or something like that, right? And when Bob enters the game, he then reboots into a new game character and then fights the user's character to save the sector. So reboot, there we go. So he gets in there, hits his little fucking chest button there, and he like, you know, if it's a underwater, you know, shooting game or something where, you know, you're chasing after the user, preventing him from stealing the prize or something like that, you know, he all of a sudden turns into like everything that game requires. If the user wins, the sector that the cube fell in is destroyed, and the sprites and binomes, which are like all the little small characters that live in there that were caught within, are turned into energy draining worm-like parasites called nulls. And I remember there's actually this crazy episode, I think in season 2, where Hexadecimal, I don't even know if she gets like some virus or she just fucking, you know, pulls some cyber witchcraft. And she like becomes this like crazy creature that's like completely covered in these nulls, and it's fucking wild. And then later on, Dot and Enzo find a null that they realize is actually their father because he died in a game and became a null. And anyway, they end up making him a suit that he can like communicate and talk and move around in. It's pretty fucking jokes, kind of like Earthworm Jim-esque. But again, you know, like I mentioned before, as the series progressed and the technology progressed, kind of the stories and storylines kind of progressed a little bit too, right? And, you know, into season 3 and 4, we start seeing not only them talking about, you know, local games within a computer, but they start talking about the web and this idea that, and it's kind of cool the way that the showrunners look at it. It's like they kind of took this whole approach that, like, you know, the computer is the mainframe, it's the home base, it's Earth essentially, and mainframe is a town, and maybe there's other cities or countries or places in the computer that exist. But the web is like space, and the web is like infinite, and like Bob gets kind of like lost into the web at one point, and then they run into him later on as if he's just like kind of floating in space. It's kind of this really cool like shipwrecked kind of, I mean, because that's a really cool way of looking at space, and, you know, the only way we really know as people who live on planet Earth and have experienced, you know, shipping and like people going out in massive ships into the ocean, which might as well be fucking space, because if you crash or your ship goes down, like, you're kind of fucked. And for years and years, you know, we had this maritime history, and that can be really applied to, you know, what we think space travel and like living in space and living galaxy to galaxy would be like. It would be like, you know, moving around the ocean and like doing all this fucking, you know, navigation through the stars and the cosmos, that it's this hostile and barren place that we really shouldn't be. But if we're able to traverse it, we can get to new worlds and we can get to new things. And, you know, of course, that's allegorical to kind of life, right? You know, sometimes you have to go through these hard paths and hard trials and tribulations to get to another place, right? So, you know, life imitates art maybe in some ways, but again, you know, this is such an interesting look, I think, at Canadian television in many ways too, because it was great. You know, I thought it was a really good thing. It was pioneering. It was one of the first CGI shows. You know, it was really well done. It was really well conceived. Had a great backing, and again, you know, is relatively, you know, well known and relatively respected. But that's the thing, is like, Canadians will, you know, every once in a while we put out something good. And, you know, that kind of sticks. You know, we have a lot of great musicians and a lot of great artists and a lot of great actors and comedians and everything like that. But, like, you know, we're the first ones to say, like, oh, you know, it's no big deal. Like, we're out there trying to do our thing. But it's not true. Like, you know, proportionally, yeah, obviously we are a smaller nation. We don't have as many people. So, of course, there's going to be more Americans, at least in Hollywood. Let's look at it that way. But again, bringing this gem of Canadian history and this gem of Canadian television, you know, to the forefront, and remembering it as something that, you know, it really did something. It really touched people. I mean, like I said, I still remember it. I'm still fucking talking about it now. So if you've never seen ReBoot, go check it out. It's really great show. I'm pretty sure all the episodes are available on YouTube. Bear with, if you're going to watch from the first seasons, bear with the technology. It's going to get there. It hasn't quite gotten too hard to watch. I don't think it's impossible to watch. You know, it's like any animation. You know, we can watch fucking stick figures, really. It is, you know, you're listening to the voices and you're listening to the characters and you're seeing their however comical or however cartoonish expressions. You know, you're watching that happen. So this is how we can appreciate the show. This is how we can appreciate any type of animation. And, you know, I've been watching Berserk, which I'll be doing a podcast on, which is a great anime, very famous anime. And I was never really into anime because of just like the general culture behind it. You know, I don't want to sound anti anything, but I don't know, I just wasn't fucking down. And a lot of the people, let's just put it this way, a lot of the people that were into that kind of shit, I wasn't fucking friends with them. So like, what can you do? But I have a lot of friends that are into that, as I know now, and they have turned me on to it and said, hey, you know, this stuff's pretty cool, go check it out. So it's a medium, it's a tool, it's a vehicle for ideas, and then that's how you can approach this too, in the shitty fucking animation. So really cool, really interesting concept. I think it's really cool anthropomorphizing, you know, things like that. You know, again, talking about Osmosis Jones today with some of my buds at work today. That's how we kind of got to this reboot thing. It's that cool kind of whimsical, surreal idea, you know, that maybe there are kind of sentient beings that, you know, I don't want to say sentient beings. That fucking sounds like some Scientology shit. But like, you know, maybe there is some type of built-in intelligence or built-in consciousness that exists. I think the Japanese have that concept in their culture, that every object has a personality and every object has a consciousness. And, you know, maybe you go further with that idea and you reach that same conclusion. But anyway, Go check it out. They say the user inputs games for fun, for pleasure. Anyway, super funny. They the opening line. Let me see if I can find it. See, like, it's so funny. I'm about to do this and I'm getting crazy deja vu. I swear, I bet I wonder if I've actually done this before, because that would be hilarious. Yeah, I wonder if I can get it. Anyway, again, it's a super fun show. Check it out. Really cool. Such a beautiful, beautiful kind of walk down memory lane. Again, it was so fun. It was so fun to even just, remember all these feelings as a kid. I mean, like I said, it's such a nostalgic thing. But again, I just remember, or when I realized how young I was kind of watching this, it was really interesting. But it's great, and I found it here. This is what Bob would say at the beginning of every episode. And I'm just going to leave you with this. I come from the net, through systems, peoples, and cities, to this place, mainframe. My format, Guardian, to mend and defend, to defend my newfound friends, their hopes and dreams, to defend them from their enemies. They say the user lives outside the net and inputs games for pleasure. No one knows for sure, but I intend to find out. ReBoot. I'm going to leave with that. Check us out. YouTube's, Instagram, Patreon. Love y'all. Thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the new studio, y'all. We'll see you soon. Peace.